Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Thursday, April 9th, coming off a Toronto Blue Jays win over the Los Angeles Dodgers where they snapped their six-game skid and right the ship a little bit. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, we have not spoken since the end of the Rocky series, so obviously a lot of losing, a lot of stuff has transpired over the past week, so a lot for us to get to here, but before we do, how are you doing and how are you feeling about these Blue Jays at this point?
Yeah, it's a good thing we missed that Rocky series because my goodness, the world would have been ending, and now it's only slightly less ending. Yeah, this is not the start the Blue Jays surely had envisioned. Still below 500, losers of six straight, but snapped that skid in a come from behind win over the Dodgers. Thanks to Davis Schneider and some heads up base running and a couple of errors on the Dodgers' part. This has been a interesting April, I think is the way that I would put it. And as things stand, it's early, it's hard to read too much into some stuff, but I think we'll do some reading into some stuff this episode.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the win yesterday settles the nerves a little bit for sure, right? But I think the real question is, I mean, what does this slow start mean for them, right? Obviously, you lose a series to the Rockies, you lose a series to the White Sox in a sweep, which is, never ideal to drop series to two teams that lost over 100 games last year. And then, of course, the Dodgers come in game one and absolutely, lay the hammer down in game one. And then, of course, the rest of the series kind of progresses how it does. I think if you were going in and you said the Dodgers are going to take two or three, you'd probably say, well, yeah, that's fine. But just just the way that the streak kind of unfolded, six straight losses. I think the real question is what does the slow start mean? And, how concerned are you when they're ultimately two games below 500?
Yeah, I mean, concern level is still a thing. This is a team that was supposed to be one of the best in baseball and has not been that to this point. So the concern level is the concern level. Do I think that this is a team that's going to be better than this moving forward? Yes, but you get swept there by the Rockies and alarm bells should be going off. And then they bring the Dodgers to town, and that obviously was its own can of worms. Gets spanked in the first game. The second game, the offense again doesn't show up, and then finally in the seventh inning of Game 3, they finally show a little bit of life. So, I mean, concern level is certainly there. I think my reaction would have been a little bit different if we'd have recorded right after the Rocky series or in the middle of this Dodger series. The day off today and the chance to kind of decompress a little bit certainly eases the nerves. But, this is a Blue Jays team, again, as I said, that's supposed to be among the best in the American League. And right now, the Yankees right now are running away with the AL East.
I mean, the sweep to the White Sox, going into the Pope's stadium over Easter weekend, tough to win that series. In all seriousness, though, I think you look at where this team stands right now and the fact that they are dealing with so many injuries, right? They lose Alejandro Kirk in game one of the White Sox series, where Tyler Heineman has to come off the bench cold and throws a ball down the line on a bunt. And then of course beyond that, where Brendan Little kind of loses his major league spot, gives up back-to-back home runs to lefties, where all of 2025 he gave up two home runs, and he gave up two home runs to two batters in that game. So, I think you look at the injuries. Obviously, the illness has played a big part in this too, right? Eric Lauer's only able to go two innings. They have to they have to turn to a bullpen game. They signed Patrick Corbin, who's pitching tomorrow against the Twins. Like, there's just been so much that's kind of gone against them to start the year, right? And I think you look at the rotation that's on the IL. We've talked about it. The IL pitch or the pitching that's on the injured list has been, it forms a better rotation than the one that they're running out there right now. And I think when you kind of look at the way that the pitching has unfolded, where you've had, Your bullpen's been taxed because of your rotation being injured and having to, work around short starts, whether it was Cody Ponce leaving early, whether it's Max Scherzer leaving early with forearm tendonitis, whether it's the Lauer start. Like the bullpen has been super taxed. So to me, this team hasn't been whole to this point, right? Like we
Yeah,
haven't
but
seen
has any
the
team been whole in baseball?
but I but like when you're looking at it, right? Like you lose Kirk, you lose Barger. Obviously things haven't like results wise haven't gone well for most of the hitters up and down the lineup. So like when you look at it at this point with the roster that they have, like you almost are kind of trying to string it out until all these guys are able to be back, right?
I,
Like the roster that they're going to be running out on July 1st, like that's probably the one that we're going to want to judge them on compared to the one that they've run out here for 2 weeks.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that, right? This is clearly not the Jays at full health. But I think a big thing that we've talked about over and over again is that there's guys kind of bumping up against it at the AAA level or whatever it may be. And they're kind of getting exposed a little bit, right? Like, listen, Laz Estrada came out and looked pretty good. It was against the White Sox, excuse me. I said the Rockies. Um, and then I'm trying to think who else kind of has
Well,
shown
so
up
so
and
let
contributed.
me as
Like,
we sit here on Thursday, April 9th, here are guys that have pitched for the team in 2026 that are not on the active 26-man roster. Cody Ponce, Austin Voth, Lazaro Estrada, Joe Mantiply is still there. Josh Fleming, and you can include like it's those guys. Or Brendan Little is the other one.
but
So
like
like,
listen to that list of guys, right? Like to have to,
well,
kind of
yeah.
scoop in that much, it kind of tells you something about not only the depth of this team, but that they're fighting it. But it's frightening that they've had to fight it this early and they haven't really answered the bell. No,
Well, yeah, it's funny because you talk about this team being like this 1 through 26 attack last year, right? Where they had so many guys stepping up, and Estrada looked really good in his appearance, right? He just obviously isn't able to stick because he threw so many pitches. Um, but the guys that they've been bringing up are certainly not guys that I figure that they would have imagined would have been pitching for their team in April when they enter spring training with Max Scherzer and Kevin Gausman, Dylan Cease, Jose Barrios, Trey Savage, Max Scherzer already said, Cody Ponce, like all these guys who were healthy at the beginning of spring training, right? Like to me, that was kind of the area that roster spot was designated to, that those guys have been filtering through. So we'll kind of see like how things shake out in the coming weeks, as whether it's Trey Savage who's going to be back first, whether it's Jose Barrios. It certainly seems like Savage will be the one, given the fact that he's already made um, a start in the minors. But when you look at like that last rusher spot, I kind of wanted to ask you this because like obviously they turned to the Austin Voths and the Josh Flemings of the world, but were those guys really the best option for that spot? Like, I think you look at Adam Macko as a guy who hasn't given up a run yet in AAA, and I kind of wonder why he wasn't the guy who they've called on at this point. Like he's on the 40 man. Like they don't have to finagle any 40 man spots to bring him up. Like why have they kind of been filtering through these journeymen who just get DFA'd after their appearance?
I mean, my best guess is that they don't want to start the clock on Mako and have him go up and down and up and down. It's kind of like a routine thing, maybe. I don't have a good answer for that. Listen, at the end of the day, I don't know that the Adam Makos of the world, as much as he's a guy that should be a contributor for these Blue Jays moving forward, those are not the difference makers. The difference makers are the Kirks and the Bargers that have either been ineffective or hurt or both, right?
Yeah, so I mean, to me, like you kind of look at the key pieces of this roster that they're going to be leaning on in July, August, June, hopefully May, and the key contributors have been either there or hurt, right? So I think kind of when you look at the offense getting off to a slow start. I think that's probably the most concerning thing. But when you look at like the pitching staff, and it has been a big part of their failure so far this year, has been the Brendan Littles getting lit up, has been Josh Fleming giving up a bunch of runs. And those are not guys that at this point you feel like are going to, maybe Brendan Little figures it out and comes back, but like those are guys that, at this point to me, them being bad and then being off the roster like doesn't really raise that much concern for what this team is going to look like in a couple months. It's just been unfortunate that they've been the guys that have been costing them games at this point.
Now, if this is a good team in June, July, and into August, it's because they've added other arms to
Yeah.
supplement that group. There will be, maybe not this year's Jordan Hicks, but I'm trying to think of some names in the past they've added at the deadline reliever
Louis
wise.
Varland,
There'll be a Louis Varland that maybe not a Louis Varland, that'd be a big ad, but
Sir
there'll
Anthony
be a Sir
Dominguez.
Anthony Dominguez
Yeah.
added. There'll be guys added that'll be supplemental to this group. They're not going to need a closer. Jeff Hoffman has been exceptional to start the year, even if the save opportunities have been mixed in terms of results. The process has been among the best in baseball. The thing is though was that very clearly, we're looking at a team that the bullpen is costing them early, and as much as it is early, the games still count the same early on as they do come June, July, August, which we keep kind of, there's this kind of idea of, oh, the issues are an issue, but just see how they're feeling in June,
Well,
July, August, right? And
yeah.
it just
The
to me, the panic meter, so to speak, is it feels higher to me than I feel like it feels for you.
well, it's interesting. I mean, right? Like you talk about that we're talking about the issues being pushed down the road a little bit, but that's because like the help is on the horizon.
It's on
Trey
the
Savage is
horizon,
working
but it's
back. Jose
also,
Barrios is working
but
back.
it's
Shane
been
Bieber is working back.
but the help right now has been
I know.
unhelpful.
I know. I don't disagree with that. But, I think to me, like this team isn't going to go on like a 10-game win streak like they did last year as currently constructed, right? But once you get Kirk back, once you get Barger back, once you get you Savage and Barrios and Shane Bieber back, like, this team will be different and be in a better position because not only does that pitching come back help your rotation, but it helps your bullpen when you're moving, whether it's an Eric Lauer or one of those starters into a bullpen role. Like it just totally changes the complexion of this roster. And the thing that like to me I look at as well is that we saw them run like use this blueprint last year where they enter the season with Dickie Lovelady and Jacob Barnes in their bullpen, and then they have the injury issues with the rotation. They've bound Francis struggle, and they turn to guys like Spencer Turnbull and Jose Urena, and Laz Estrada was in the mix too. But of course, like as the year progressed, they kind of like found the right mix of players, and to me, like they're in that phase right now where they're trying to figure out who's going to work and who's going to be on this roster for the long run. And obviously, it sucks when you lose a series to the Rockies and you get swept by the White Sox, right? Like those are games that you don't get back, right? Like say you lose, you get swept by the Dodgers. Well, it's okay because you have series against the Rockies and the White Sox coming up down the road, but you don't have that. You don't have that, kind of looming as a soft stretch down the road. So,
This is the
it's
soft stretch. I mean,
exactly. So you
like
don't
they've
get
got
it
the Twins
back.
coming up here,
Yeah.
and I mean, to me, you have to sweep the Twins.
Yeah, I mean Patrick Corbin game one. We'll see how
But I
that
don't
that
know.
kind of
But
turns
I don't
out.
think that. I mean, listen, you can only you can only play the guys in front of you, and you can
Yeah,
only work with what you've got. But the offense, I feel like we're beating around the bush here. Offensively, this
yeah,
is a team that looks lost. And I know the ex Woba stuff. Listen, I think it's them and the Padres are like 29th and 30th in the difference between Team X Woba and actual, Woba or OPS or whatever it may be. But the bats are not producing in a meaningful capacity. I mean, Davis Schneider might be the only guy that's really hitting, and he's sitting on the bench half the time.
yeah. So I mean, if you look at it, the Blue Jays are 11th in the majors in xWOBA, and they are what are they in WOBA? They are 22nd in WOBA. So I mean, you look at the difference there, and obviously they're they've run into some BABIP issues too, where they're 25th in BABIP with the 264. So there has been some unluckiness, but I guess if you want to look at like one point in this roster that maybe is more of a red flag to me, and it's kind of been the offense, chasing a ton, making bad swing decisions, and just generally, they're not being a single guy that has kind of looked like the best version of themselves. Maybe Andres Jimenez, I guess, if you want to kind of put him into that spot. And obviously you mentioned David Schneider, and I guess Miles Straw hitting 417 would be pretty close to the best version of himself. So, um, the slow offense, I think some unluckiness. We saw them get off to a slow start as well last year, and I don't know if there's like necessarily kind of the turning point coming for them, right away. We saw it was kind of the Bo Bichette homer that they all pointed to last year against the Rangers, right? Where they struggled offensively for so long, and then that homer kind of seemed to flip the switch for them. So, I guess to you, I mean, like, how much do you think that this is a slow start, and how much do you think that this is, a real concern for this team long term?
Yeah, I mean, some of this is like there's a what's the word I'm looking for? Some of this I think is going to turn. Vladdy is better than a buck 25 WRC plus guy. He will, you know, he will come back to being a 130, 140 guy. That 1,000 OPS bull prediction I had early in the year, uh, maybe at the door. But I mean, this is a guy that's very clearly going to be good. I mean, he's walking a ton. I think he's walking more than he's striking out this year
He is,
by a
yeah,
healthy margin, right?
yeah.
Like this guy looks great. Kaz Okamoto, uh, hmm, I mean, the power he's demonstrated, like I'm not going to dispute that, but I
It's
don't
been
know,
tough
man.
sledding the past little bit.
I don't know, man. This guy, I think
Well,
they were
so
hoping for a lot more contributions from
yeah,
him in terms of the bat to ball
so
stuff.
that's a guy that I think you can look at as like there are definitely better things to come, right? Like this is a guy who in Japan struck out over 20% of the time once in his career. And so far it's a 39.2% strikeout rate. And obviously,
Like that's untenable.
teams are pounding him away, and it's on him to make that adjustment, right? Like obviously there's room for him to improve, and it's still a 109 WRC plus, so he's been a better hitter than league average thus far. But obviously the strikeouts have piled up recently, and I even though I think you look at the way the authority that he's put the ball in play with as something as a little bit of a positive, but there was always going to be a transition period, right? And obviously he came out of the gate super hot in that A's series and looked almost kind of like an all-star type third baseman, and for him to now be struggling with major league pitching, like it's kind of something that I think that we generally expected, right? And so it's going to be interesting to kind of see how he bounces back and how he adjusts to seeing so much spin, right? Like I actually think that he's handled fastballs pretty well, but he's kind of been getting beat by, the sweepers away and the sliders away and fastballs down and away too. And so to me he's a guy that is a clear kind of positive regression candidate because if he runs a 40% K rate for the entire season, um,
He will not be in the major leagues very long.
yes.
Do you? How do I phrase this? Don Varsho, are we concerned?
Wow. What a difference for him compared to spring training. Um,
Well, like I don't get it because this happens every year where guys will rake during spring and get to Toronto and they leave their bat in the sun. I mean, like this is a guy I think we all had penciled in to be a key contributor for these Blue Jays as like a middle of the order staple, and he's just been a non-factor.
yeah. So I mean, just looking at like his batted ball stuff, right? Like the ground ball rate is 12% higher than it was last year. His fly ball rate in 2025 was 54.7%. This year his fly ball rate is 28.1%. And for a guy who we saw, take an enormous leap with the amount that he was barreling the ball, right? Like last year, it was a 15.9 barrel percent, and this year he has one barrel to this point, 3.1%. So like there's obviously struggles there. And it's not like he's striking out a ton, right? Like the strikeout rate is still 13%. It's which is a career low for him. He's just been pounding everything into the ground, right? And not making the best contact. He's been, I think you look at the xWOBA and it's fairly respectable because he's still hitting the ball decently hard, but there just hasn't been the balls in the air. So, that's another one to me where, he's been such a fly ball hitter for his whole career that probably an easy adjustment for him coming there, right? So like I mean there's all these little things that are 2 week small sample size stuff. But I mean, like for you, like is the do you think Varsho is going to be this ground ball machine for the entire year?
I mean, it would it would be pretty surprising if it was the case, given the multitude of sample size that describes him as otherwise. But I mean, to me, just he hasn't looked all that good in there. I mean, pounding the ball in the dirt. Listen, like I know you listen, we look through the numbers and you start to be like, okay, maybe like tone it down a little bit, like breathe. But it's this guy is a positive regression candidate, and this guy's a positive regression candidate, and this guy's a positive regression candidate. Well, what if not all of them regress positively? Then you're in huge trouble.
Yeah. And then you're the team that dropped, what is it at this point? They've dropped they've dropped like 7 of 9 at this point, right? Like then you're that team. So, I think obviously, there's guys who are gonna have to figure it out and whether that's like seven of their starting nine at this point, like, there's certainly an argument to be made there. I kind of wonder um kind of what the turning point will be. Obviously, you hope it comes for this team, but you just kind of look at you look at the guys like Varsho and Springer who were so important to this team's success in 2025, right? And both of them have struggled. And you look yesterday and they both pick up a couple hits. Varsho has the RBI single up the middle that ties the game. Like those are the things that you're kind of looking for, right? Like the signs that the shift is coming. And we'll kind of see, the Minnesota series, obviously, the Twins are not a great team, but they've played all right so far. Like there's not going to be, the Twins aren't going to like go down easy, right? I think that's the thing too, about playing all these bad teams early in the season is that they're not necessarily bad teams yet, right? Like they still have hope. They still have things that they're trying to accomplish early in the season. They still, don't look up at the scoreboard every day and see the 40 and 70 record. Like they kind of see themselves as that group that's around 500. So, like you'd rather play the White Sox and the Rockies in August than you would in March and April.
Well, those are teams that have sold off pieces. They're not
Exactly.
they're not getting the worst version of this year's Rockies or White Sox or Athletics or Twins or any number of teams, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Listen, like here's kind of where my head's at. I still believe that this is a Blue Jays team that can and should make the playoffs, but getting out to a start like this and losing, crucial games makes it an uphill climb. I think that's the case now. I think this was a team that I think a lot of people had kind of penciled in to a postseason spot. And I think that is just a lot to ask right now to think that they're going to waltz their way to, at the very least, home field in a potential wild card series. Because I think the division at this point is a huge ask given how good the Yankees have been. And yeah, it's early, but I mean, there's a big gap already.
I mean, yeah, you look at it, what were they? They were 8 back of the Yankees last year in the division, right? Like something like that. So, there's obviously time to come back and kind of flip the script. They obviously just have to start playing better right away. And that's going to be tough to do. This is something that I did kind of want to get to, but like when you're missing a guy like Alejandro Kirk for 6 weeks after he undergoes thumb surgery, and you're turning to guys like Tyler Heineman and Brendan Valenzuela, who yes,
Doesn't look ready.
useful, but they've both struggled so far to start
Mightily.
here. So, I did kind of want to talk a little bit about the injury to Kirk and the injury to Barger because, those are two guys that we were anticipating were going to be significant contributors to this Blue Jays team. And I mean, to you, kind of the Kirk thing, like just how big of a loss is that for this team?
You can't understate it. Listen, like he wasn't exactly crushing the baseball to start the year, but if you want to talk about guys that are going to be contributors over the long run for this team, and you want to talk about positive regression candidates, that may have been your 1A on that list. And to lose Kirk for the entirety of spring, basically, I mean, he's going to be back presumably at some point in June, I would figure. Uh,
Yeah.
it's a huge hole in your lineup that already has a couple of holes in it because you lost out on other guys, right? Or again, a guy like Kaz Okamoto who has not come out of the gates swinging quite like maybe the Jays had hoped, or even a guy like Jesus Sanchez has obviously contributed far beyond what people had maybe not necessarily hoped for, but he's been a really positive contributor in a lot of ways, but like he is he has he been their best hitter this year? I mean, by X-Will, but he certainly has. I mean, obviously, Vladdy's been raking and Jimenez has been raking, but like, like they're missing a guy, and that guy is Alejandro Kirk.
I think you just watch the games and it's like super notable or noticeable, right? That he's not there, that he's not behind the plate. I think the difference too, where Valenzuela and Heineman like are catching the best pitchers on this Blue Jays staff is something different for the starters as well. And I think it's not their fault, right? Like, I mean, I've seen a lot of Heineman hate on online in recent days, and like,
Yeah,
it's not a
it's
guy that's
not.
built to play every
Well,
day,
it's
right?
also like, I mean, the big one is of course him tossing the ball down the first base line. He comes in as cold as you can,
Yeah,
and you just blink, and
and
it's a
well,
very heady play by, I don't remember exactly who it was, but I mean, again, it's just it's heads up baseball.
yeah,
I mean, the play at
you're
third
getting you're
base.
getting out heads up by the White Sox.
I know it's like, yeah, that can't happen.
Yeah.
It's the White Sox. I mean
Well,
the
you're gonna say too, right? Like then he gets thrown out at third later in the series with two
but
outs
that's
as the
that,
tying
and then
run,
throws the
and
ball
then
away
throws the
another
ball
inning
away
later.
again, right? Like it's just the thing where you're exposing a backup catcher to a full-time workload, and Brandon Valenzuela obviously has some good tools, seems to be like a promising player, but he's still 25
Right.
and making his first getting his first taste of the big leagues, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a learning curve there, and you're essentially throwing him into, not necessarily a full-time workload because they're splitting them, but it's still like a pretty significant. It's more than Tyler Heineman was playing before Alejandro Kirk got hurt. So, I think if there was one guy on this roster, and we've said this for years, like if there's one guy in this roster that they can't afford to lose, it's Alejandro Kirk, really.
Yeah. And what a freak injury. Like what a
Yeah.
just a dumb injury.
To me, like that's a spot that you lose him for 2 weeks, or sorry, 2 weeks. You lose him for
If
like a
only.
month and a half. You lose him for 2 months. Like that's a stretch that could make, gaining ground tough because it's one of your most important players on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, it completely changes the complexion of this team. It's just, again, and then on that same vein, Barger obviously wasn't hitting to start the year, but you had him penciled in as a guy that could be a huge breakout candidate. Oh, he destroyed his ankle. He's out for 2 weeks, and goodness knows if he'll be able to turn it around when he gets back after he's been on the shelf. Right? It's kind of like, again, just you pick at, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
you've hit bone.
Yeah. I mean, you look at it, right? And like you lose Kirk, you bring up Brandon Valenzuela. You lose Addison Barger, you bring up Tyler Fitzgerald. Like you're digging into your depth, which then, beyond like it's just not as good talent on your roster. And one thing that's been interesting to me has been like the way that Vladdy has been pitched this year, right? Obviously he doesn't have Bo Bichette behind him, but you look at the way that teams are pitching him, and like he's been getting pitched tough, and you mentioned earlier that he's like walking more than he's striking out, and that's because teams aren't really throwing him pitches in the strike zone. It's been a huge difference. You look um at kind of last year, like he saw 51% of the pitches in the strike zone, and this year it's 49%. And I get that that's like a small difference, but it's still a significant one, right? Because it
It
signals
adds
that
up
teams,
over time.
and teams are willing to throw him on the edges with the risk of missing outside of the zone rather than, I need to throw a strike here to not walk him, where then pitches will leak over to the middle of the zone, and that's when he's going to do damage.
Yeah, and it becomes, it just compounds, right? And listen, this has been a negative episode coming off a Jays win, but yeah, like we didn't get to hit the panic button after the White Sox series. So consider this my panic button hitting episode.
Level of concern for you, like out of 10.
I mean, if it was at like a one or a two like a week ago, right now it's at about a six, and that might even be us underselling it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm still more, I think, like three. Like I think that there's still so much time. I think that what this team's like ultimate destiny will be determined by how guys come back from injury and what how much ground that they're able to make up once they are whole again. So,
Yeah.
um we'll kind of see how that all turns out.
This episode of the Bird's Eye View podcast is brought to you by BioSteel. Use code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order at biosteel.ca. Again, that's code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order. For all your high performance hydration needs, visit biosteel.ca. Thank you again to BioSteel for sponsoring today's episode.
Let's talk through, this Twin series. I think the most notable thing is Patrick Corbin coming up. What did you kind of make of that signing? Like, obviously, you didn't want to run out another bullpen day, so they make the decision to dip into free agency, and they go with Patrick Corbin, who was seemingly already built up, coming off a solid-ish 2025 with the Rangers, but
By
obviously,
his standards, I'd say.
yeah, yeah, certainly not
Well,
the most exciting name, I guess.
we did the over unders 2, 3 episodes, whatever ago it was. I'll toss another one at you here. Patrick Corbin, over under 1.5 starts as a Blue Jay.
I'm gonna take the over, but just because we aren't we aren't at the point that I guess you Savage is the closest where he's made one minor league start, and I think it's either tonight or tomorrow that he's making his second one. So we'll kind of see how that unfolds with him. But I just think like the high minors starting depth just kind of quite isn't ready. You Chad Dallas has been good, CJ Van Eyck has been good, Grant Rogers had a bounce back start, but again, like, are any of those guys more prepared than Patrick Corbin to take on a major league lineup at this point? Probably not.
Uh, it's tough, man. They've got themselves in quite the pickle here. And if Patrick Corbin is your answer, it certainly doesn't seem like a good.
I just can't believe that like we're at this point where
It's April 9th.
mid
Like, how did this
February
happen?
mid February we're talking about if they bring in Max Scherzer, where are all these guys going to pitch? And now we're looking at this
There's your
rotation.
answer.
Yeah.
They're all going to pitch because all of them are blew up their arms and various other ligaments.
Yeah, it's been a very unfortunate start for this group. I mean, like expectations for Corbin, like you think you try and let him be like a two-time through the order guy, a one-time through the order guy. Like it just hurts your
Just
bullpen,
chew.
right?
It's just chew. You just ask
Yeah.
him to chew, and hopefully, whatever he's chewing on is palatable.
So think, you said it's been a little bit of a negative episode, but let's kind of try and switch the vibes a little bit. I wonder if there's anybody on this team that you have been impressed with, that you've been encouraged by. I think you look at the bullpen a little bit for that. I think you look at Louis Varland, Tyler Rogers. I know the Jeff Hoffman trust at this point is certainly not there, but to me, he's rocking, what is it? Like it's a 48.4% K rate and a 6.5% walk rate. Like there's been a good version of Jeff Hoffman this year, despite a couple of blown saves.
I think I gave him some love uh earlier in the episode, but I mean, this is a guy. I mean, if you look at his StatCast page from 2024 and you compare it to his StatCast page from this year, they look pretty similar. Like this is a guy that looks, I don't want to say all the way back. That's probably a large statement for Jeff Hoffman, but this is a guy that is generating whiffs at an elite rate. That's generating chase at an elite rate. That's striking guys out at the highest rate among all qualified relievers. If I've got my numbers right here, he's
Well, Mason
really
Miller, 72% K rate.
okay. Well, he's 100th percentile K percentage. So forgive me for believing the numbers. But nevertheless, I mean, the barrel rate has gone from one of the worst in baseball to something right around league average. And the hard hit rate has become something of a tool in the toolkit for him, right? He's done a good job limiting really hard contact. So I know, to me, this looks like a guy that they envisioned signing last year. And even to a certain extent, last year, I think the home run to fly ball ratio was up into the teens and beyond. Uh, that was unlikely to sustain. He's done a really solid job keeping the ball in the ballpark this year, and some of that is luck, and some of that is changes in maybe pitch mix, and some of
I
that may
think
be
his
health.
splitter has looked incredible.
Well,
Against
he
lefties, it's fading a ton, it's dropping a ton. I know Joe Siddle's talked about it on the broadcast, but like that to me has like looked more like a usable weapon for him than ever before.
yeah, he looks like he's really like found something there. But just on the whole, even yesterday, I mean, putting away Otani, looking with what was it? I think it was 97, kind of painted
Yeah.
there, window shopping, and to fool Otani like that is it's like a microcosm, but it's a sign of the kind of stuff he's been doing early in the year, where they're hunting stuff down and whatnot. That it's very clear that he looks like he's a contributor.
Yeah, if you look at the Sierra leaderboards among qualified relievers, he's sixth with a 0.87. Sorry, 0.82, even better. And the relievers ahead of him are Mason Miller, Andres Munoz, Brian Baker, Brooks Raley, and Grant Wolfram. So,
It's a lot of really important names, and he's right among the top of them.
yeah. Tyler Rogers, the kind of last one that I'll get from you before we run here, but like I mean the Tyler Rogers experience has been pretty comfortable so far, I'd say. Like he's gonna come in, he's gonna get
As
some ground balls, he's gonna
described,
throw a little weird. Like he has been everything as advertised and like just like an incredible like sense of calm. Like if he's coming into the game, you feel like there's not going to be runs coming across the board.
yeah, it's just pounding everything into the dirt, which is exactly what you'd kind of hoped for with him. I mean, listen, when he comes in, I'm not exactly seeing flamethrowers or nothing, but I mean, he's been as advertised as you alluded to. Um, yeah, just a tremendous asset to these Blue Jays.
Anybody else that is encouraging you at this point that you wanted to shout out?
I mean, the starting pitching's been awesome. We talked about it before we hit the record
Yeah.
button. Kevin Gosman, exceptional. Dylan Cease, exceptional. Like the top of the rotation. Just just class, as they say.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch those guys work. Obviously, having like the pocket aces is fun. It's something that, we've kind of talked about the rotation in the past as kind of this collective group of guys who are going to go out there and eat innings. And now you got these two guys at the front that are going to go out there and, combine for 20 strikeouts over 2 games basically. So, has been really fun to watch those two. But obviously as we head into this Twins series, it's Corbin, it's Scherzer, and it's Lauer. So
Bit of a different mix.
we'll see. Hopefully they're able to bounce back. But yeah, obviously a tough stretch. Before we run here, you got anything else on these Blue Jays as we head into the weekend series?
Let's win some ball games here.
It would
It would
hope
behoove them to do so.
hopefully they build off of yesterday's win and are able to kind of turn that into a nice little stretch of better play for sure. All right. Well, with that, that is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening along on the audio provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow us all on Twitter. I am at Worden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter. And the pod is at BEV_pod. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the games this weekend.